Thank you very much to everybody for coming back, and we are most happy that Belinda managed to get on. Welcome to our group this morning, Belinda, and I wish to introduce your presentation, which is going to be Un Respiro de Vida, a breath of life, giving wings to farm worker families during the COVID crisis. A very relevant and interesting topic, which connects with the other topics that we've been discussing this morning. Belinda Hernández, Arriaga, is a faculty coordinator of the Masters in Counseling MFT program at USF South Bay location. Belinda has a doctorate in education and is a licensed clinical social worker with 18 years of experience working in community mental health, with a specialization in child trauma and Latino mental health. Belinda has extensive experience in county mental health, where she worked in Santa Clara County Juvenile Hall, mental health in San Mateo County Pre, to 3 high-risk infant mental health team. She spent a significant time working at the University of California, Berkeley, Tang Social Services team, where her focus was working with international student families. She spent 8 years as adjunct family at Santa Clara University. She also co-founded and is part of the Latino Advisory Counseling in Half Moon Bay, and has done extensive work on the coast, working with farm worker families and their children. In her community practice, her focus is on immigration trauma, U visas, asylum, and she has worked with refugee children in San Mateo County. Belinda is founder and chief executive director of the Ayudando Latinos A Sonar, a Latino cultural arts, education, and social justice program dedicated to working with rural youth and families living on the coast side. Her current research is focused on understanding the emotional, psychological, and traumatic experiences that impact undocumented and mixed status Latino youth. Belinda's work also focuses on understanding the cultural arts as a healing space for this community of children. Belinda is committed to social justice advocacy and multicultural practices in counseling that gives voice to underground communities and expand indigenous cultural practices in the field of counseling. She has spent the last 2 years in South Texas border working with asylum-seeking families as part of the Bay Area Border Relief Team she helped to co-found. Belinda was named San Mateo County Woman of the Year in 2020 and received the Jefferson Award for Service, as well as named as San Mateo Arts Commissioner to support racial equity in the arts. This very much connects with our other presentation this morning on Indigenous knowledge and how we can integrate the arts and everything else into our counseling, our cultural knowledges. Thank you, Belinda. We look forward to your presentation on the breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. A special shout out to Brian, who I see here too, for your mentorship and for believing in this work. And oh my gosh, this last year and a couple of years of our work together. So thank you, Brian. I want to welcome you all to the presentation this morning. It's really emotional to be able to present on such a powerful community of farm worker families on the North Coast in the program of ALAS, and really connecting it back to the school-based family counseling model. So I'd like to just kind of start there, and if it's okay, also share a PowerPoint that I have. But before I start that, I just kind of wanted to explain that my work over all the years of being a licensed clinical social worker has really been rooted in schools, in school-based work and in family practice, right? But as we know with the BFC model, we're thinking about how surrounding the child, there's all of these elements that happen in their daily lives that include family, that include environment, that include experiences of oppression, that include crisis, and that include a need for direct response in order for them to be able to reduce trauma and function better in school, in the community, and feel supported. So in the work that I was doing in schools, I really realized that there needed to be a connection where we live to the whole child, working directly with farm workers and farm worker families. And that's really how ALAS began in many ways, the program itself. But then as COVID hit, there was another response that had to happen, which was immediate and direct. And it taught us a lot about how we mobilize resources and mobilize support to children that live in farms, to their families that live remotely, and to a community that is often very visible, but in many, many ways invisible, both in the classroom and in community resources. So I'm going to share a little bit about ALAS, but I'm going to skip around. Let's see if I can get to this. It's not letting. Here we go. So ALAS, when we think about ALAS, we think about cariño, which is care. We're really committed to the community, and in a way that advances healing by honoring the cultural wealth of those that we serve, which really translates into, we believe in using the strengths of the community, the strengths of who they are, the strengths of the families, the individuals, the children, to be able to capitalize on healing, right? So using their own internal core. And COVID was no different. During this time, we really had to think about how are we going to support the community that was in many ways really the front lines of going back out into the fields while everyone was isolating. We saw that they were the ones that were on the ground and really working for us as a country to be able to feed us, to continue our food supply, to continue supporting us. But one of the things that we found was that they actually were hurting for food themselves. And many, went in between this idea of not being able to quarantine and what did that mean, and not having food. And so we began this wraparound support, with the children, with the farm workers, and started this pop-up food pantry. And as you can see here, they actually drive up and we give them the food. So everybody was thinking about how do we make food pantries work during a time when you're supposed to be quarantined? But we had to rethink it, and we did drive-by where they were able to walk through and get their supplies. Another thing that we do at ALAS is we provide free counseling. We usually go out to the schools, we go into the community, we have a community clinic. But during the COVID crisis, when counseling was shut down, we saw that actually the number of the rise in need for mental health services for our community, particularly the children. And one of the reasons why we were seeing this was because it's very important to think about how farm workers have very compromised living situations in many ways, where they live in a very closed, small shelters. and not necessarily have access to Wi-Fi, which is one of the things that we see here on the coast side as a rural community in general. We didn't have good Wi-Fi. We don't have good Wi-Fi. However, when you think about the remote areas of where people live, and this is, I just want you to stop and think about maybe a geographic location close to you that perhaps you haven't really had to think through too much about what is their Wi-Fi or internet connectivity situation. As for us, it's for some of you that don't know where Half Moon Bay is located or where we're coming from, we are really sitting in the backyard of Silicon Valley. We're in the heart of the technology bubble. And yet, where you think we would have for sure the best Wi-Fi and the best access to technology, we actually don't. And our children did not, especially when you think about remote learning. And what was happening for children at that time was all remote. So one of the things we saw with our farm worker community and families was they were struggling to get access to even their online classes, but they were also struggling to get support in a way that normally schools are able to help because of language. So their only support was, their family, which was a really strong network of support. Yet at the same time, when it came to education, many of the parents were only monolingual Spanish speakers, not English, able to translate what the teachers were trying to give in terms of homework or how to do problems and worksheets and all of that they didn't understand. So the mental health need went up because we started to see depression. We started to hear stories of anxiety, isolation, fear, and children really not doing well. So part of our challenge was to say, well, here the world is isolating, we're having to isolate in our homes, and that's best practices. But we have a group of children and families and individuals that are really hurting and struggling. And our clinic is no longer the option. We need to go to them. So we all as a team had to mask up, protect ourselves, but we literally started taking this idea of doing farm worker mental health home visits in the fields. So we started to go out into the fields with our resources team and be able to provide some group counseling, some supportive tutoring groups, and one-on-one mental health support for the children. That was really important at the time and continues to be a big need. I love this picture here. These are 3 of our farm workers that we know well in our program now, but I have to tell you that they are a direct connection to Un Respiro de Vida, which means a breath of life. When Ala started going out to the farms during COVID to take PPE. So one of the things that has happened at Ala's is that, and I think it's really important to think about this in relation to our school-based family counseling model. So much of what we do is in schools, in the community, in our nonprofit spaces that are thriving, right? But COVID taught us something so much more. For us, even at Ala's, where we've been embedded in the community for a good number of years now, we had assumed, even though we worked with the children, we had not, and in many ways, we would interact with their parents. We would meet with their parents as they came into the clinic or into programming, but we really had never gone out to the farms. And we also made assumptions that there was programs that was caring for the farm workers, themselves. It wasn't until COVID that we went out directly to the farms. Of course, there's all the red tape of getting permission and building a relationship with the farm owners and all that, which we had to do. But this gentleman right here in the middle, his name is Felix, and I have so much respect. If you can see them, they are all about, Felix is in his late 70s. And the other 2 gentlemen are in their early 70s. When we went out into the field, we started this program actually during COVID. There was the community was asking, how do we get involved? How can we help you? Well, people were watching that from their homes, social media, people were all staying, connected to being on computers, seeing what was happening in the world. And a lot of what we were doing was resonating with so many people because they saw us going out and people from their home wanted to be able to help. And I think that's true with so many of us in our work. There's community members, orgs that want to help. Oftentimes we don't know how to get them involved or how to, connect with them. But for us at Allah's, the community and donors and people from around even the country became direct supports for us to be able to give more out, do more in services. So we had a taco restaurant say, how do we want to donate some lunches for farm workers. Like, do you have any opportunity to get that to them? And we said, yeah, let's see what day. And we looked on the calendar and we were going out regularly to take food, to take PPE, to take educational support resources, to work with the mental health. And we said, well, how about Friday? Let's do Friday. And then as we got ready that Friday and the lunches were coming and we were going to go do our first kind of like lunch delivery, we realized, hey, let's call it Farmworker Fridays. And since that first initial call, we have not stopped Farmworker Fridays since COVID began. And it's actually been this amazing program that we take lunch out to the farm workers, to the farms. And if children are there and their families, we provide for them as well. And it's grown into not just giving them lunch, but also giving them sweatshirts and hoodies and rain jackets and flashlights and educational material, pamphlets. But it's built a relationship with them, which has forged opportunities to grow and connect our other resources and services for them. But Felix in the blue, when we went out and took him, this first Farmworker Friday meal, he looked at me and he said, Belinda, in 40 years, I've worked on this field in 40 years. No one has even given me so much as a Coke to drink. And that quote sticks with me so deeply because I can see his face when he tells me. I can see the gratitude. And I also think about his words of something as simple as a drink that no one has ever offered him. As a farm worker that cares for the wellness of our community. And that kind of became our mantra of, we got to get out to them. We got to take the resources to them. And because of time, I'm going to keep, we also, during this time began doing art with the children and the farm workers online and their families. This is a picture that we were by this time already all together. But this guy right here in the blue, his name is Nacho Moya. You should look him up on, if you can, his program is called Moya Arts. His motto is relax, don't stress, and do your best. But what he did for our program was, and what he did for so many during COVID was he started online visual arts program, and he still gives the classes online as well. And we're back to in person, but he started, we had 80 children come online each week and do classes of art with Nacho. And he would not only just do the art, but talk them through these amazing elements of saying, you're doing awesome, you're great, you can do this, believe in yourself, don't stress, do your best. And you know what, we found that this artistic connection online during COVID to farms and so as I shared with you, many of them couldn't get necessarily internet, but they often could use their phones. So a lot of them joined in through their phones to be able to have their children do art. Many of them cramped up into one room, living in one room. So this opportunity to kind of like escape into another world during COVID. This arts program also became a portal for mental health. And it also became really important for education because for many of the children, they felt like they were failing in school. They felt like they were not doing good because of the many barriers, whether it was language, whether it was access, whether it was not being able to connect and understand. So having this art program was this like kind of revival of, you're doing great, you can do this. And it was super important. So another really important piece, if you can see here where they're all wearing the masks, the reason why I call this topic Un Respiro de Vida, which means a breath of life, is that we had, when this happened, we didn't have, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine now, but we didn't have boxes of paper masks that everyone would grab and put on, right? When COVID started, there was no mask, at least not any accessible for many communities. And for our farm workers, they were, while other people were able to shelter in place, and for the families and for the children, they actually had to continue working, which meant they were at a high risk of exposure. And also there was no vaccine at the time. So you can remember the fear. I mean, it's almost so, you know, it seems distant, that piece, right? Where there was no vaccine and where there were no masks. But all us rallied around to say, we're the ones as a community, we can't wait for the mail to get here or for the shipping supplies to get here or for even our first, you know, responders from the county who were struggling to get all these supplies. We couldn't wait because every day that we waited could have been a death, you know, or something, right? So we had because of our regular arts programs, we have mothers that are really good at sewing. And our arts director said, let's gather together, get material, and start making masks ourselves. We made over 15,000 masks in just the first month, and we had material coming from all over the country. And people that were wanting to share and send, and it was really amazing. But if you can see in the window where they're all wearing their masks, you know, we had a local photographer in town did a portrait series of families with their masks to remember during COVID. And this was an image that, you know, continues to capture the spirit of what we did, because we spent so much of our time making those masks and getting those masks out in our food pantry, in the farms, in drive-bys. And really, I think until those paper masks and other masks started coming in many ways, that group of moms saved the community. And they, you know, they were really proud of what we were able to get done. This is our Alice team here, and here's us going out into the farms to take resources and supplies. One of the things that I'm going to briefly share is, you know, we've learned through this COVID crisis that going out into the farms has been so critical. We also realized that we didn't have all the material and supplies we wish we could as kind of this mobile resource. And I know this is like a part 2 of a presentation I'd love to do one day, but I will just sneak it in since it's here to share that we post-pandemic, and we're not post, but we're still in the pandemic here with all the resources we're trying to get out to the field and to the children, which has grown because of COVID, that now we're creating a mobile resource bus. that has been in partnership with Genentech, with Life Science Cares, with Gilead. And we have launching coming out in September, a double-decker state-of-the-art bus that's going to have a mental health protected, what did we say, like soundproof room for telehealth, telemental health, or in person. And the bottom, there's going to be a classroom space of like 10 computers, laptop, all broadband, so children can connect to meet with teachers, or parents can do the teacher connection, because they often can't go to school meetings because of their time and their work schedules. We're going to have a padded room upstairs that allows for them to have medical telehealth, because we found during COVID that the farm workers do not have access to good health care at all. And even though we have a health clinic in town, they don't want to take time off of work to lose their jobs, because one thing we have to understand is many times, like, they can be replaced. So if they're missing work, you might have a situation where their mayordomo will say, hey, well, if you don't need to be here, then we get someone else, right? And they're very loyal to their work. So, but others don't have access to insurance. We found that, especially during COVID, there was a really high rate of those that didn't have access to insurance. So now we're going to have telehealth on this bus, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a yellow bus with Mexican painted flowers and colors, so that when it rolls up, the kids will be really excited. And yeah, we have a conference room in there. So again, all of this is done as a result of COVID, and seeing that really some of the team is calling it the Equity Express. Why equity? Well, they say really they should have access to all the resources everyone else does. But again, COVID really taught us that we had to go out into the community, go out to them. You know, when we think about the farming communities and the lack of accessibility to essential services, we find that they don't have access to health care. You know, there's a big need for that. Education, so many are falling behind, and they need more support and more tutoring. Sorry about that. And economic development. So while I will say that many of the farm workers tell us that they do this job because they love it, we also do see that so many of them don't have other options. And so they, as a result, their average income is about 25,000 here on the North Coast, in the Silicon Valley, in the heart of California, in the backyard of the technology bubble. So when you think, the reason why I go through that list is because it's really important to think about, these are where also the multi-million-dollar small houses are. Rents are $3,000 a month. So how does a farm worker family make it with this salary? They don't. So the resources that we can provide is so critical. And this was just kind of some community data about farm worker health, you know, and how come they really don't have access to health care. And if you look at the 43% says, well, I can't take time off work, I'll lose my job. So too expensive, 34%, no insurance, 34%. That's really high. So when you think about the impact that Un Respiro de Vida had, our outreach efforts, and I want to preface by saying we didn't even know the impact that we were going to have or make during this time. And I want to encourage all of you to think about, who are those communities? You know, thinking about the school-based family counseling model, who are the children in our classroom? Who are their parents? What are the protective factors that we need to be considering? And what is invisible to us? right? So much of what we, even me, like I said, what we see and sometimes what we don't know. We pass by the fields every day. We've been working with the children in the schools every day. We've seen these same families in our spaces in many ways, but this was a huge piece of information that we didn't have. And so connecting to this was huge. Can I just do a time check? How am I doing with time? Oh, 5 more minutes. Okay, great. So I will just close by saying that it takes a village. I think when you all hear this presentation, what I hope that you can take away is that it really does take a village to make this work happen. Un Respiro de Vida really connected us to community members, to leaders. As you can see here, this was this PowerPoint we also used to connect about the bus, and we have all of this group here of life sciences that came together during COVID to help us. We've never worked with Gilead, Genentech, Avi, which has been amazing. They're a life science company, you know, and or companies, and even Salesforce, they as corporations came forward and said, how can we help our farm worker families? How can we be supportive? They helped us with our food pantry. They helped us envision this new idea of the bus that they've helped to launch and developed. And it's going to be coming out in September. Please follow us on our website here at Alas. We're doing a lot of like PR of it's coming. But I do want to say that I can't say enough how excited the children are that there will be this bus, mobile resource services that comes directly to them. And USF, which is where I'm connected to, University of San Francisco, came to us in the summer, well, during all this time, my colleagues and said, Belinda, teachers and folks in the School of Ed, program, and said, how can we help? We see you all are doing this with the families out in the fields and taking masks and getting vaccines out and food. What about, their education? And of course I said, well, yeah, we're struggling. They're struggling. And they said, well, let's bring, educational support out during the summer and do a summer camp. So we actually did summer camp in the farms with teachers that came from USF. And we did it outside, and, we were able to mask, and we were able to bring like a book so that kids could have access to books. And we realized that, they hadn't gone to the library and they didn't have books at home, of course. So that was really important. And I want to fast forward you. It was so successful that the second year, which was last year, we said all of these children in the farms have been, and in the farms and in our community, which is essential workers too, children of, that have been living in these really cramped conditions, need to come out and get ready for school. So we had our second year of camp with 60 kids. And one of the big themes that we walked away with that they kept telling us at the end was, we felt like we were in a cage and now we feel free. And many of them said that during COVID, they felt they were in cages. And this was our third year now doing the camp. And I have to say, I'm so excited because we had 95 kids this summer. 95 kids that came out to our summer education camp, and we do the arts with them. And we see it as a portal of mental health. Everything we do is really framed so much around like fun, culture, resources, services. But I can't emphasize enough as I close that all of this is really rooted in impacting wellness, impacting mental health, and opening portals for the mental health counseling to be continued with these children. and connecting this all back to the amazing school-based counseling model that understands the whole child, their environment, the parents, and really strengthening each child by strengthening the family. So I will end with that, and happy to take questions and thoughts or reflections.
Sorry. I can't.
No worries.
Oh, sorry. I now have too many places to be at the same time. Thank you very much, Belinda. I apologize for that. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. So let us give you a round of applause before we move on. I have to comment on your picture of the mask making. Really resonated with me, because when we were in the early stages of lockdowns here in South Africa, my daughter, who is very skilled with needlework, made us all masks. So we were all wearing masks that was made from indigenous materials and fabrics. And she actually went to the school in the neighborhood, because they live in a small town, to also distribute these homemade masks. We don't actually, I don't think I have ever worn these paper masks that come from Asia. So I was really, you really connected with me on that one. But okay, let's open the floor to the others. Anybody with a question, just put up your hand.
I guess I would just say that I'm struck with all of our presentations here about just the opportunity that this COVID disruption has given each one of us in terms of a new way to see our children, a new way to see our families. And I just love this mobile resource bus you folks are working on, and the thinking that's gone into that by virtue of what you discovered were needs. And so just congratulations to you on this outstanding work, and everyone who's making a difference.
Thank you so much, Karen. It really has opened our eyes to what could be, what can be, and what's needed, right? So yes.
Thank you. Any other person? Narit, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Belinda. Wow, it was very interesting, and I think it's remind us again the importance of the collectivism and the support of the community. So it's connected to the other lecture that we got today. And Belinda, I don't forget your presentation from last year. It was also very, very interesting. And as one of the editors of our proceeding, I hope this time you will you will write your paper, because it's so important and it's so interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nari. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Just so that you all, from last year, it was about the asylum seekers and all the many asylum seekers coming. So, yeah.
I remember that you talked about the immigrants on the border between the US and Mexico, and it was very interesting, and it's important because immigrants are all around now. I mean, I lived in Israel. We cope with immigrants all the time, and we have much to learn from you. We will be very happy if you can write it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nari. Thank you so much.
And we have a lot of problems here in South Africa with what they call xenophobia, because there are migrant workers that come in to work for their families in their native countries, but then they get targeted, or sometimes they are part of the crime scene, but it is a very difficult situations. And I think what you did last year and this year is just to emphasize the importance of the interconnectedness also with people from other countries in your own country.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Anybody else there? Mircea has a question.
Yes, no, question no, Belinda, is your work is very interesting and useful for help families and children from other cultures. So thank you for sharing with us your work, and congratulations.
Thank you, Mirta. That means so much to me. Thank you so much.
Tom, there we have a question.
Belinda, a moment ago, you used the phrase that the pandemic had opened your eyes to things. And it strikes me that it's important for us to understand that the pandemic didn't just create inequities, that it revealed inequities.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about conversations that you and those you work with have had about trying to take these things that we're discovering during the pandemic and create some momentum so that as the pandemic, goes away, we continue to support children whose families work on farms. Have you had those kind of conversations?
Thank you, Tom. Absolutely, yes, because we realized, and I mean, I will just go out on a limb and say, we thought we were very active at all levels of, the lives of the Latino families in particular that we serve, particularly farm worker families, until the pandemic, when we saw and revealed so many things we didn't know. And we thought, well, if this is happening for us that's out in the community working with this group of folks, how much more is this happening? So what we really started to look at too is research out there and what's being written about and what's being talked about. And unfortunately, it looks like there is a big gap in research that's needed to address even more this area. And what I mean by that is so we're looking in different silos. We have the advocacy side that we've been talking to our senators, our city officials, are definitely like our political kind of portal where we live has really taken note of what we're doing, of what's happening, and it's changed the narrative here. I want to just say another really amazing piece of news that has come out of directly what you're talking about, Tom, is we started pushing. So we used social media to really get out the stories, to say, here's what's happening. And I think at that time really had a captured audience because people were at home, they weren't distracted from other things. So people were really listening. And our city officials and our county officials who have said, we've lived here for years and have not known or heard about all the things you're bringing up to us. So we really had people come to the table. And last week, we're really, really excited because for this past year and a half, we've been pushing creating a farm. We also saw really complicated farm worker housing scenarios, and we've been pushing for more farm worker housing. We found an abandoned house that our city owned, and our city's been owning this house for like 7 years. And we've been asking them, can you do this? Can you do that? And they all say, no, we're going to use that for a parking lot. Well, we went to them recently and we joined with the nonprofit building group. And we said, can you please build a farm worker resource center with farm worker housing in downtown Half Moon Bay on this property? They said, look, a long story short, Tom, the city council just approved it. We're going to have a 4-story farm worker housing with farmer resource center, first ever in downtown Half Moon Bay. That's almost impossible to pass. It's going to be run by aulas on the floor down, and it's going to be transformative because kids can walk to school and all that. But that was made possible because of our politicians seeing what we were doing. The farm worker bus was made possible because of Life Science Cares and companies seeing what we were doing. We believe that this bus, if it works out and is a model, we want it to be able to, we want Life Science Cares to launch this model around the country to other farms, to other remote areas, to other places. And so we're now using Stanford University, USF that are doing research with us to also get the word out about the mental health need, the school impact, the importance of all this. So we're finding in our research that there's so many stories that they've never told, and sexual assault, really high rates of violence that we also haven't really had to think about for mental health, that we're starting to highlight. So we are working as fast as we can on different layers, and trying to really resonate with and connect with other groups like in Salinas, Watsonville, Lodi, Sacramento area, UC Davis, and of course being here today, connecting with all of you. Hopefully you'll take this back in some way and kind of expand it. So thanks for that question, but it is a passion that we have to try to really say, let's not leave it here in our backyard, but try to, because get it out, because if it's happening to us, it's happening to them. It's happening in California, it's happening everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Belinda. There's a question from Jackie and then Brian before we conclude.
Linda, thank you so much. I've known about your work for a few years now, and the only word that I could only think of what you described, going through a pandemic, going right as a first responder and not wearing a fireman's suit, a nursing or physician clothing, it's just who you are, just with a mask and bringing the goodwill that you brought to people that were in need. I think that's the definition of courage. I'm just so proud of your work and inspiring for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I mean, we really, like, the courage came from seeing those farm workers and their families out there on the line for all of us, and we couldn't leave them behind. And so they do it for us every day. And we're just a very small piece of that work, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Belinda, you are an inspiration to us. You are a global pioneer, visionary leader in school-based family counseling community intervention. I first learned about your work several years ago and was astonished that you were taking your students from San Francisco all the way down to the US-Mexico border to work with the migrant families and bring them counseling and support. Your development of the last program, organizing a double-decker bus, building a farm worker center. You are a shaker and a mover, and your work is just, I am in awe of what you've been doing, and you're so modest about it. And finally, I just want to say, this was a model presentation on how to link your topic with school-based family counseling. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. As I said earlier, I really appreciate you believing in us, believing in me. And Brian's been so patient with the different projects that we are doing, because I'm always having one crisis to attend to another. So it's been amazing. And I do really look forward to being here with all of you, because your smiles and your work too is inspiring, gives me a lot of energy. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Belinda, I do want to encourage you, as I tried to do with the other two presentations, which were all linked to the very important concept of indigenous knowledges, not only of our own background, but also the people around us. And your work brings that indigenous knowledge. So please, if you can find a moment of time to send us some writing so that we can include it in the proceedings, because one of the biggest problems with knowing about these things is that regular academic journals don't want to publish it. We need to find a voice for the indigenous cultures and the migrant cultures of the world. Not only yours, but the whole of the world. the peoples around. So I'm going to ask Helen to give us a concluding remarks.
Belinda, thank you so much for all that you're doing. And I am going to echo what everybody has already said about your work, your project, and the impact that you are making on the people of the farming family. I am so glad I got to meet you because I live in Silicon Valley in California. You're in my backyard. And at the time, yeah, so I'm glad I got to meet you. And also, when you used to work at County Mental Health in Santa Clara, I had referred families to County Mental Health in Santa Clara because of their wraparound services. And so I think there was that connection way back then. We just didn't know about it.
Yay,
Yeah. Amazing. And, you know, the work that you're doing, everything that I believe in, the support with the community, the environment, the child, you know, and being creative about how you can support them. And when we think about COVID, we talk about essential workers and how our life would have stopped completely when essential workers were not there. But, you know, just I can visualize you being there in the forefront, working with essential workers and getting them the mask, getting them what they need. And I think about Maslow's hierarchy of need. How do we address mental health without looking at their physical needs, like the home, shelter, clothing, the food, the security? Unless you have all that, how do we get to the mental health? They need to feel safe. They need to feel included. They need to feel wanted. And they're human beings just like everybody else. And the way people treat people who has less or who has less education or what, I mean, we need to kind of shatter that, you know, way of thinking and really respecting all people. And I think you are kind of starting that, you know, march, and we're going to follow your march, that we could all be marching towards treating people with respect and giving them resources and what they need. And you are our model for us. And thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you for those words, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you, Belinda, and everybody being here today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow again at a more reasonable time for the Pacific Central Time people.